Hi class, this lecture will be on part one of the Metamorphosis. So in part one, we have Gregor Samsa who wakes up to find himself turned into a horrible vermin. Um, the description of who he is, he's really a bug. A lot of people hypothesize that he is a cockroach, which we're going to get into the meaning of that in a moment. But really what we learn is that Gregor is a traveling salesman. He really lives a dull life. The surroundings of him are surrounded as dull, gray, rainy, really sets the tone, the setting of this, almost kind of like T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland-esque, right? It's just very like, not, there's no passion, there's no joy. Gregor's just living a very bland existence. And he is he's got this gilded frame that he keeps in his room with a woman that he doesn't know. Now, a lot of people have hypothesized that this might be him, projecting a life that he wants, like this gilded life. And remember in The Wasteland, the gilded throne in part one that's discussed with the glass dolphins, kind of like fake bourgeois-esque kind of lifestyle, very upper middle class, rich and wealthy kind of life. And so perhaps Gregor is really hoping that his life is more that way and that he desires to be part of the middle class or to appear to be wealthy. Or it could just be a symbol for him desiring a life that is not the one that he actually has. But we do know that he hates his job. We also know that his father is in debt. And so he is working off his father's debt to a man, and he's probably got 5 or 6 years left. The whole scene in general is very dark humor. It's funny. Again, the whole fact that, he isn't even late for work yet. He just missed the early train and his boss has already sent somebody to wake him up and bring him back to work. I mean, we do find out that he has been entrusted with some cash from his boss, so that could be the worry. But again, people are more concerned with him not going to work than the fact that he is turned into this, vermin. And again, the word vermin, if we think about it like, rats or cockroaches, they are probably, the things least desired, especially in civilization, right? And so oftentimes in history, the working class have been referred to as vermin. In fact, Jews were called cockroaches. I know some immigrant groups have been called cockroaches, and so that word has a connection to those things, and Kafka was aware of that. So just keep that in mind. And there is, like, again, a lot of things going on. There's this authoritative father who may represent capitalism and the hierarchy of power that goes on with that, with the boss, right, the manager, and then the worker at the bottom. A lot of people have hypothesized that Gregor himself turned into a cockroach. The cockroach form is actually a metaphor for depression or disability. We know that Kafka worked with workers that had been injured. And again, if we think about capitalism, like the worker is only of value as long as they can perform. And once they cannot perform, whether it's due to, depressive state or even an injury, they are no longer, useful. And so they're therefore useless and thrown out. And in a way, like the family of Gregor really treats him this way. His father becomes very angry and very hostile towards him. Now you can interpret this as the father is afraid of his son, right? He's now a giant cockroach, or you can interpret it as he realizes now that Gregor's not going to be able to perform anymore, and so he no longer sees use for him and no longer looks at him as somebody that he needs to treat well or have any value. We also kind of hear some interesting lines that really critique the working class, and Kafka also describes a hierarchy going on. The Kafka's or Gregor's boss is always sitting on this chair above people, so he looks down upon them, like again establishing this hierarchy of submission. And then you've also got the fact that workers are, Kafka writes, like untrusted. Like, what is it about them that makes them so unworthy of trust? And that's mentioned in the story as well. We also find out some interesting things about Gregor, that he was once a lieutenant and an officer, and there's a picture of him smiling. So we knew at one point in his life he was happy. Now, was he happy because he actually was in a job that he enjoyed and a position that he enjoyed, or was he happy because he was on top, like on top of the hierarchy, right? Like an imposition of power. And so you always kind of want to question those things when they come up. And then at the very end of the story, the father is very violent and kind of, again, locks Gregor in his room. And so that's what we're left with, is Gregor banished from his family and really like turned away. He was the provider and now he can't provide. And so he is now useless and he is looked at as a nuisance and a vermin. Okay, I'm going to make another video for part 2.